Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we are taking a close look at a text that, well, it might seem pretty obscure at first glance,
Yeah, definitely.
but it's actually this incredible masterclass in literary structure and, profound narrative design. We are exploring the biblical book of Zephaniah.
Right.
And if you're joining us, you likely appreciate digging past the surface level, finding out how the architecture of an ancient document holds up under intense scrutiny.
It really is an architectural marvel. I mean, when you look at the structural breakdown of Zephaniah,
Mm.
it takes what can initially feel like this dense, chaotic ancient text.
Very heavy.
Exactly. Very heavy. And it reveals a highly intentional, almost cinematic design.
Yeah.
The author is doing something incredibly deliberate with geography, with shifting perspectives,
Yeah.
and with this really intense tension between devastation and hope.
Okay, let's unpack this because we're dealing with a text where the specific wording carries the entire weight of that architecture.
Right.
We are setting a firm ground rule for today's deep dive. We are keeping the scriptures absolutely central. So we'll be reading directly from the text and clearly citing the references as we go. The entire roadmap that we're analyzing hinges on these specific words, so we really need to hear them exactly as they were written.
That is the only way to do it justice. You cannot fully appreciate the intricate design of Zephaniah without feeling the weight of the actual bricks it was built with.
Yeah.
But before we get into granular details, let's establish the overarching framework for you, the listener. If you just glance at this text casually, it might just read as a relentless barrage of doom and gloom.
Right, just pure destruction.
It is heavy, but when you look closer at the underlying structure, it operates on a profound formula. It's judgment, leading to purification, leading to restoration.
Judgment, purification, restoration.
That is the heartbeat of this entire book. It's a calculated process of breaking down to build back better.
Okay, judgment, purification, restoration. Let's keep that lens securely in place as we jump into the first movement of this text. This covers Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 1 through chapter 2, verse 3.
Right. The overarching theme here is the impending storm and the call. It sets a very intense mood right out of the gate. We're looking at imagery that evokes a literal storm cloud with lightning striking down on crumbling walls. It is the impending day of the Lord.
And the text itself does not pull any punches. It begins with this sweeping, universal judgment language. To keep the scripture central, let me read Zephaniah 1.2 in the NASB translation.
Go ahead.
It says, I will completely remove all things from the face of the earth.
I want to pause right there because if we're reading this critically, that opening statement raises an immediate question.
Absolutely.
I will completely remove all things from the face of the earth. That is a total unmaking of the world. But if the judgment is truly that universal, if literally everything is wiped out in verse 2, how do we have an entire book left to read?
Right.
Is the author talking about a literal physical end of the planet, or is this functioning differently within the genre? That is the crucial question to ask when approaching this kind of literature. When the text invokes the day of the Lord, it's employing a specific type of prophetic hyperbole to communicate the sheer cosmic scale of divine intervention.
Okay.
The day of the Lord is not just a 24-hour Tuesday where everything goes wrong. It signifies a definitive era of reckoning and reordering. The author starts with this terrifying global unmaking to establish the severity of the divine justice, but then the lens sharply narrows.
It's a zooming effect.
Precisely. In verses 4 through 13 of that first chapter, the focus shifts directly from the entire earth onto Judah and Jerusalem. It goes from a cosmic scale right down to the author's own backyard.
Wow.
And it goes on to describe this day of the Lord in absolutely visceral terms in verses 14 through 18. A day of wrath, trouble, distress, and darkness.
But right when the text establishes this pronouncement of unavoidable annihilation, there's a sudden pivot in the tone.
Yeah, it's jarring.
It really is. It happens in chapter 2, verses 1 through 3. Amidst all this cosmic and local destruction, there is a quiet invitation to seek the Lord. Let me read that specific reference.
Please do.
It says, Seek the Lord, all you humble of the earth who have carried out his ordinances. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you will be hidden in the day of the Lord's anger.
What's fascinating here is the sheer tension the author intentionally creates. You have this terrifying, unavoidable cosmic judgment bearing down on one side, and right up against it, this quiet, almost fragile invitation.
Yeah.
Notice the phrasing, perhaps you will be hidden. It doesn't promise that the storm isn't coming. It doesn't say the judgment is canceled. It suggests that there might be a shelter within the storm itself.
It's like standing in an open field watching a massive supercell approach, and suddenly someone offers you a bunker. The storm is still going to hit, and it's still going to tear up the landscape, but there is a path to survival. But how does that tension resolve? Because the text takes a sharp turn here, leading us right into the second movement, which covers Zephaniah 2.4 through 3.8. And this is where the literary structure becomes incredibly geographic.
This second movement is where the author's brilliance really shines. The text systematically begins to circle a specific target. We can actually map out the geography based on the references in the text.
Wait, let's trace it.
First, the judgment goes west, focusing on Philistia in Zephaniah 2.4 through 7. Then the attention swings east, addressing Moab and Ammon in chapter 2, verses 8 through 11.
So we've established the horizontal axis, west, then east.
Then the text moves south, bringing judgment on Cush in Zephaniah 2.2 draw. And finally, it points dead north, focusing on the mighty empire of Assyria and the city of Nineveh in chapter 2, verses 13 through 15.
Let's visualize what the author is doing here. If you imagine a beautiful old world style compass, we just hit west, east, south, and north. Dead center in that compass is the city of Jerusalem. The author is literally drawing a geographical circle on a map, and the circle is tightening.
It is.
If I'm an ancient listener sitting in Jerusalem, hearing this read aloud, I'm watching the judgment hit my neighbors to the left, to the right, below me, and above me. My psychological response would probably be a mix of terror and immense relief. I'd be thinking, look at all those pagan nations getting what they deserve. We are the chosen people. We're safe here in the middle.
And that false sense of security is exactly the psychological trap the text sets up for the reader. It brings us to the twist in chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. After meticulously judging every surrounding nation on the compass, the focus violently returns to the center. It snaps back to Jerusalem.
It's like Judah was holding up the shield of exceptionalism, thinking they were untouched by the flaws of their neighbors, and chapter 3 just shatters that shield right down the middle.
The devastating realization in the text is that Judah is fundamentally no better than the surrounding nations they just saw judged. The protective barrier of their pride is completely dismantled.
Yeah.
The author details how the city's officials, judges, prophets, and priests have all become corrupt. They are the bullseye. The judgment has circled them, lured them into a false sense of superiority, and finally landed squarely on their own doorstep.
It completely strips away any illusion of national superiority.
Yeah.
You can't point the finger at the west or the north when the center of the compass is equally compromised.
Exactly.
It forces the reader in Jerusalem to realize they are part of the global problem established back in chapter 1. And that brings us to what feels like the crucial transition verse for this entire deep dive. It's Zephaniah 3.8.
The big hinge.
Yes, the hinge. It reads, "Therefore wait for me, declares the Lord. For the day when I rise up as a witness, indeed my decision is to gather nations, to assemble kingdoms, to pour out on them my indignation, all my burning anger, for all the earth will be devoured by the fire of my zeal." This single verse acts as a massive pivot for the entire book.
That verse is the bridge. It synthesizes the universal judgment of chapter 1 with the targeted national judgments of chapter 2. It gathers everyone, the north, south, east, west, and the center, into one place. It concludes the judgment phase and sets the stage for the final and, frankly, the most shocking movement of the book.
Which brings us to movement 3, the Great Reversal. This covers Zephaniah 3.9 through 20. If we were mapping this visually, this is where the trajectory takes a long loop out of the destruction and points upward to a completely new reality. A future characterized by a flourishing tree of life and a diverse group of people standing together.
The whiplash of the narrative here is profound. We just spent 2 chapters systematically tearing down every nation on the map, including Jerusalem, culminating in the fiery zeal of chapter 3, verse 8.
Right.
Logically, you would expect the book to just end there in total silence and rubble. But instead, the text immediately pivots to the purification of those exact same nations. Listen to how the text describes this. I'll read Zephaniah 3.9 directly.
Go for it.
"For then I will give to the people's purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord, to serve him shoulder to shoulder."
Let's really think about the socio-political implications of that verse for the ancient world. "I will give to the people's purified lips, that all of them may call on the name of the Lord." The very nations that were just completely dismantled in chapter 2, Philistia, Moab, Ammon, Cush, Assyria, they are now in chapter 3 worshiping together.
Yeah.
They are serving shoulder to shoulder. That is politically insane for the ancient Near East. These were bitter, warring enemies. How does the text justify this massive leap from total destruction to unified worship?
It justifies it by redefining the purpose of the judgment itself. The judgment wasn't meant to be final annihilation. It was a severe, necessary purification. The very nations that were at each other's throats, the ones that were judged for their arrogance, violence, and idolatry, are now united. And the text explicitly links this new shared worship to their purified lips. In the ancient context, lips and speech are tied to worship and allegiance. Their communication has been cleansed. They are no longer speaking the divided, toxic languages of nationalistic pride, but a unified language of reverence.
So, the destruction of their pride was the prerequisite for their unity.
Absolutely.
And it isn't just the surrounding nations that experience this transformation. The text highlights a second major theme in this final section, which is the complete transformation of Israel. The center of the compass is restored, but it looks very different than it did before the storm.
It's entirely rebuilt on a new foundation. The text outlines 4 key ideas regarding this restoration. First, we see the removal of pride in Zephaniah 3.11. The Lord says, "I will remove from your midst your proud, exulting ones, and you will never again be haughty on my holy mountain." That arrogance that made them think they were superior to the surrounding nations, it is permanently excised.
Which leaves a vacuum. If the proud and exulting ones are removed, who is left to inhabit the city? We often hear the term remnant thrown around in these texts, but what exactly constitutes a biblical remnant here?
That is the second key idea. A remnant, in this prophetic context, isn't just whoever happened to survive the blast. It is a specific type of community refined by the fire. The text defines them clearly in chapter 3, verse 12. "But I will leave among you a humble and lowly people, and they will take refuge in the name of the Lord."
Okay.
The remnant is characterized entirely by humility, not power or status. They went from arrogant exceptionalism to a genuine reliance on the divine.
That is a staggering shift in national identity, from trusting in their walls, their wealth, and their status, to being a people who are simply humble and lowly.
It changes everything.
And that humility leads directly to the third key idea in this section, the incredible intimacy of the Lord dwelling right in the middle of them.
It does. Look at chapter 3, verses 15 and 17. The text says, "The King of Israel, the Lord, is in your midst. You will fear disaster no more." And then verse 17 gives us one of the most evocative images in the entire book.
I love this verse.
"The Lord your God is in your midst, a victorious warrior. He will exult over you with joy. He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy." The storm cloud of judgment from chapter 1 has been completely replaced by a sheltering, rejoicing presence.
He will be quiet in his love. He will rejoice over you with shouts of joy. Contrast that with the universal unmaking we read about in chapter 1, verse 2.
Right.
It is the total opposite of the terrified, crumbling city we started with. And it culminates in the final verses, 19 and 20, where the text describes a worldwide regathering of the people. The lame are saved, the outcasts are gathered, and their shame is turned into praise across the entire earth.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, you see why this final section captures the very heart of the passage. It is the ultimate resolution of that tension we explored all the way back in chapter 2. Remember the invitation.
Perhaps you will be hidden.
Exactly. Seek the Lord, perhaps you will be hidden. Here in chapter 3, we see exactly what happens to those who are hidden. They are purified, stripped of their pride, and ultimately restored into a community of peace.
Let's take a step back and synthesize everything we've just uncovered for you, the listener. We started with what seemed like a dense, chaotic, ancient document, and by following its structural map, we've walked through a masterfully constructed narrative. The Book of Zephaniah is framed by 3 distinct movements regarding the day of the Lord.
Right.
First, the day is coming. That is the universal warning and the quiet invitation to seek shelter found in Zephaniah 1.1 through 2.3.
Second, the day brings judgment on the nations and on Jerusalem. That's the tightening geographic circle we traced from Zephaniah 2.4 through 3.8. It proves that no one, not the surrounding nations in the north, south, east, or west, and not even the chosen people in the center of the compass, is exempt from the consequences of their corruption.
And third, after judgment comes restoration. The beautiful, shocking future described in Zephaniah 3.9 through 20. This is where former enemies stand shoulder to shoulder with purified lips, and a humble remnant is gathered together in the presence of the divine.
Which brings us right back to the core theme we established at the very beginning of our analysis. If you walk away with one underlying framework from this deep dive, let it be this: judgment, leading to purification, leading to restoration. In this text, It is never destruction just for the sake of destruction.
Right.
The breaking down of pride and corruption is the absolute prerequisite for building back a better unified reality.
And that is exactly why this ancient architectural marvel matters to you today. Why spend time analyzing a literal geographic map of ancient arrogance? Because it highlights a timeless, profound narrative about human pride and the absolute necessity of humility. You can appreciate how this text forces the reader to realize that no one is exempt from accountability. When we point fingers at the neighbors to our left and right, we often forget that the compass has a center, and our own shields of exceptionalism are often just waiting to be shattered. But equally, the text promises that no one is excluded from the ultimate restoration, provided that pride is finally stripped away.
This raises an important final question for you to mull over as we wrap up. The text explicitly links those purified lips to the ability for all previously warring nations to call on the name of the Lord together, to serve shoulder to shoulder, as we read in Zephaniah 3:9.
Yeah.
What does it mean for our world today? That true unity, this incredible image of shared worship and lasting peace, could only occur after the complete leveling of their individual nationalistic pride.
What a phenomenal question to end on. The idea that true unity only arrives when our personal and national pride is finally out of the way. That is definitely something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Book of Zephaniah. Keep asking those big questions. Keep looking for the underlying structure in what you read, and keep seeking those moments of profound clarity. Until next time.